Good morning, friends. Ann here. Got my cup of coffee, got the Word of God, and today's reading is from Matthew chapter 20, verses 17 through 19. Let's read it, and then we'll talk about it. It says this: Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. On the way, he took the 12 aside and said to them, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life." So what's going on? First of all, this is the third time that Jesus has predicted his death to the disciples. This is the third time that they are hearing that Jesus will die. But this time he goes on to give even more details. He goes on to say that the Son of Man will be delivered over, that there will be some sort of betrayal, that he will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. The Jewish leaders of the day will be the ones that will be driving this. They will condemn him to death and hand him to the Gentiles, which are the Romans of that day, to be mocked and flogged and crucified. But on the third day, he will be raised to life. Friends, can you imagine what it must have been like to be one of the disciples that heard Jesus saying this over and over again? And then for the third time, as they are on their way to Jerusalem, on the path to the very town and the very place where Jesus says all of this is going to happen, here they are hearing that Jesus would die this horrendous death. Can you imagine just the response and the reaction of the disciples? Maybe some of them were like, "No, this can't happen. Jesus is all powerful. He hasn't done anything wrong. Of course, he can't be put to death." Some of them might be horrified, just in shock at the idea of a crucifixion, which was the most excruciating death, saved for the most violent and offensive people who were being punished. And friends, the only people who could give such a punishment, give such a sentence, were the Romans. The Jews couldn't even do that. And so this is why he would be given over to the Romans, who would carry out that sentence. Friends, as you read this, how do you respond? Years ago, I was working in children's ministry, and I was teaching the Easter story to the children there. And when you teach the Easter story, you have to be very careful because kids have different concepts of death, and they react very differently. And I remember that there was this one little boy who was in there. He was probably about 5 or 6, and he raised his hand and he said, "Miss Ann, I don't think Jesus had to do that for me." Friends, he was torn apart that Jesus would go to the cross and that he would go to the cross for him. Friends, I want you to know that even as Jesus was walking, he knew he was choosing to go to his death. He knew he was choosing to be crucified, the most excruciating death that was saved for the most violent people. And yet he did it for your sin and for my sin, for your shame and for my shame. Today, I want us to remember, as we get ready to walk out this next week with Jesus as he moves to the cross, that Jesus willingly walked to the cross to take away your sin and shame. Have a good day.